Hi, I'm Marc Daniel Nelson here on behalf of Apogee, doing a nice little breakdown of a great song I was mixing, strictly only using a few of the Apogee plugins, including the 8068 channel strip, some of the compression plugins they have, and some of the spatial reverb effects plugins. This is a great track by the artist Romain Axisa. That is a great representation of putting a band inside the studio. And so what we're doing today is going to do a quick mix breakdown of the 8068 plugin in general, since that's the only EQ channel strip I have going on in the project. Let's take a quick peek. Essentially, we've got a full band here: drums, percussion, bass, acoustic guitar, some electric guitars, saxophone, which is great, gang background vocals, and vocals. I have most of the channels just strictly the 8068 Clearmountain plugin. Then I have the Opto on some of the background vocals. I have the Mod Compressor on the saxophone and the lead vocals. And for effects, if I go over to my effects buses, I have the Clearmountain Spaces and the Clearmountain Domain. These are two different styles of reverbs and delays. And if you can see, if you kind of break it in, you've got delays, de-essers, EQ, all inside this effects plugin. This is a plugin that Bob and the rest of the Apogee crew took some major time creating great presets. And something really cool about this track, there's a sax solo, and there's a preset in the Domain plugin called Jungleland, based off of Springsteen's Jungleland track that Clarence Clemens played the sax solo on. And it has this extreme spatial delay, great sounding reverb for a saxophone. And I'm using that here, and it's just such a perfect thing, because if you use it on the dry wet in the insert versus as an aux send, you can really dial in a little tighter than if you just had it as an aux send. It kind of creates this, I wouldn't say almost like a separation between the verb or the effects and the actual instrument, but it does do something really cool versus putting it directly on an aux and sending it that way. So we'll go into that too. But let's take a little listen to the track. The song's called Morning in the Afternoon. We'll listen for maybe 30, 40 seconds. At that point, I might actually just disengage all the plugins by doing that. And we'll hear what we've got going on, and then we can do a deep dissect of all the instruments and what I decided to choose and what the actual 8068 sounds like on this track. Let's take a listen.
Turn off the light, feeling nothing at all. The body's at night and the morning's alone. The mouth dry, spending the day in a world full of pain, laughing and crying and do it again till I die. And I'm not the only one swearing at the sky. A great many stars have deceived, some and tried. I wondered at night on the roof, was it me in your eye? When you cry,
Okay, great track here. Me as a mixer, the first thing I wanted to do was kind of create this sound of a band in the room. It does remind me when I was thinking about these older era, like 90s era groups that would be able to do live tracking in a studio, and the way that sounded, just a band playing live together in a room, but in such a great controlled room in a studio environment with great microphones and great gear. It's just probably one of my favorite sounding processes when I listen to music, is hearing like a great band sounding in a great studio. So there are some reverbs and stuff going on the vocal, a little bit on the drums, but mainly it's pretty stripped down. And this is before I've done any automation. But if we go in real quickly before we dive in, let's play it again for a second, and then I'm gonna like bypass everything. So this will be with 8068 plug-in on everything pretty much, a little bit of compression on the Apogee compressors, and then some reverbs. And then I will bypass it all.
When you cry,
and here's it with it off. Back on. Obviously, you're getting size and balances are changing a little bit, but what you're also hearing is the process of the Clearmountain 8068 in action, replicating the sound of the console, which is my favorite 80 series Neve console, the 8068. What it does, it just has this kind of open, really silky, large sound, very punchy. It does all the things that are good. It musically, essentially, everything that feels musical. The 8068 can do that extremely well with all sorts of types of genres. The plugin does something extremely cool, just like that, where when you apply a plethora of these, you get that sense of unity where the air and the silkiness starts kind of gluing everything together. I don't have a stereo bus on my master. All I have right now is a limiter to bring up the level completely, and it's barely knocking anything down. So what you're hearing in general, compression-wise and stuff, is strictly from either the Mod Compressor, the Clearmountain 8068, or the Opto 3. Let's dive in a little bit and listen to the drums and hear what we're doing. So on the kick drum, pretty simple stuff. Really don't need to go through anything too crazy, but what I can do is I can take the kick out. What I want to do is just add a little bit more dimension. If you look at some of these, I actually have the line amps turned up a little bit because pushing that line amplifier does actually kind of grind things in a very pleasing, gluing way as well. Here is without any of the 8068 on the drums. It's a very well recorded track. Putting it in. If I add a little more thunder on the kick. Just very musical. It doesn't need a ton of things. What I can do is kind of take some of that bark out of the overheads. I can take some of that mud from the bottom end of the actual overheads. And I can make sure it stays in with the kick drum, because essentially that's what you're wanting to get. You're wanting to get definition out of the kick, keep the overheads as this beautiful kind of representation of your stereo. These EQs aren't crazy surgical, but what they do is they add a really good character and texture to the whole mix. So when you're pulling in, let's say, the drums and the bass together, if I pull in the bass EQ, you can see I'm pushing the line just to get a little more color out of that. Same as with the Mod Compressor, I'm just taking a tiny bit of that out. If I take the EQ out of the bass, it kind of everything falls backwards. Obviously there's a volume gain change there, but essentially you're losing a lot of the energy, even with the EQ in. You get a lot of that finger noise back when you're adding that 700 in. You're taking the high pass down. Let's go and listen to the main part of the whole song, which is this simple kind of classical acoustic guitar. And I'm going to take everything off first. Pretty small sound, but it's in the center of the image and you want everything else to kind of wrap around it. If I put it in, I'm taking some of that low mid out of the sputter of the bottom out at around 220 and a little bit of 350 just to get some of that squawk out. And I'm taking everything up to 70 to get all that low junk out. Pulling in the Mod compressor at the same point. Just tapping it. This is a cool compressor because it's super, super fast when you want it to be. And it's got its own personality. Compressors are weird. Sometimes they have the greatest sound on one instrument and then they just never work on something else. The ModComp seems to be pretty good at just kind of taming things and not necessarily adding too much aggression. It's more about just kind of keeping things kind of tied down and tidy, which is really great. So if you hear that with the guitar and the drums. It's also kind of flat, which again, this cool plugin really does add a little bit of dimension on things when you add it up. Here's two of the other guitars. Now, one thing I can say that I've done repeatedly on a lot of these is taking the low pass and taking the top of this high pass, low pass. If I solo the guitar, kind of the lead electric guitar part, there's a little bit of this generic guitar solo preset on it. It's kind of got a spiky stem to it. And what it's doing is it's playing with the track in a really cool way with the other guitars. Just the way that the drums are pulsing with the percussion. Now without that it'd be kind of flat. Not really very exciting, but I didn't want to add a ton of reverb on that electric guitar. So we're just getting repeat effects, and then I'm doing a little bit of EQ correction on that as well. And you got the counter melody from the Mellotron here. Bit of that 220 again, that 350, that knock kind of sound. We've got to pull that back on the Mellotron part. And pulling in the background vocals with that reverb again. So the reverb I have on the background are just a preset that Bob made called Pop Ballad Vocals. It's really clean, it's very open, it's very bright, but it makes things sit really good. You have all these elements doing different things, where you're having a little bit of the delay kind of tickling on the right side, you got the Mellotron on the left, you get the center, like the force of the song, which is the kick and the bass. This is a big fat bass tune. Then you're gonna obviously have the lead vocals. If you start adding too much delays and sputter and stuff like that, it just messes up the mix. Let's listen to the vocal and see what we got for that chain. I'm gonna take out the reverb first.
Turn off the light, feeling nothing at all. The body's at night and the morning's alone. The mouth tries.
There's a common thing going on with a lot of these tracks around 350. There's just this little bit of a hawky sound that I'm kind of taking out of most things.
Of pain, laughing and crying and do it again till I die. And I'm not the only one swearing at the sky. A great many stars have deceived some who tried. I wondered at night on the roof, was it me in your eye? Turn off the light, feeling nothing at all. The body's at night and the morning.
And then I stacked this LA3A style Opto 3A on top of it. And that's just tickling a little about 1 dB.
Spending the day in a world full of pain.
But it does this really cool percussive thing when you engage the 3A.
And
And then on the reverb,
and I'm not the only one swearing
something very similar again. I got the pop ballad vocal on that as well.
Some who tried. I wondered at night.
I am doing a little automation, so when things are brought down, the reverb is not nearly as loud. And then I bring it up on the heavier stuff. But in general, we're just hitting the pre-delay around 94 milliseconds to get a little more separation. And again, on its own, with everything in.
Turn off the light, feeling nothing at all. The body's at night and the morning's alone.
Let's just take out the EQs. So the compression and stuff is still on, but here's without the 8068 on the whole mix.
In a world full of pain, laughing and crying, and do it again till I die.
Listen how everything starts kind of stretching out and the separation starts unfolding when you engage all the EQs again.
And I'm not the only one swearing at the sky. A great many stars have deceived, some who tried. I wondered at night on the roof, was it me in your eyes?
Things just seem to get a lot more balanced, and having a little more space around each other is important. All right, let's go to the sax. I got a little bit, again, at 1.6, I'm taking a little bit of that poke because there's a little aggressive frequency here in the sax. A little bit of air at 10K, some of the junk at the bottom. Using the Mod Compressor, same spot, without. And then I've got the Jungle Land preset, which is again from the Springsteen track, with Clarence playing this beautiful sax solo on that track. I remember watching the DVD Blood Brothers, which was Bruce Springsteen going into the Hit Factory in the 90s, tracking in a studio live with the full E Street Band. And there was a lot of Clarence sax solos going on, and I do believe Bob mixed all those things. He had a very beautiful, spacious delay against the reverb on the sax I always loved. And then finding this preset, it was just like, there it is. That's the sound. So that was a really cool find to find that too. There's just so many layers to all these plugins. You get lost for days and days, and it's just fun to kind of tinker with stuff. Like spin is basically feedback, and then you get your pitches of all the reverbs, and then you get your balances for everything. There's just access that goes on and on and on. But honestly, the presets on most of these things are just absolutely incredible. So what I really wanted to do today was mix this song strictly with the 8068 Clearmountain plugin and some of the other Apogee plugins. I don't use anything else. I didn't have anything on the stereo bus. I hadn't done a lot of automation. And one thing I do know is when you apply, let's say, a channel strip from a console on every channel and you're using consistency on that, things tend to glue a lot quicker, faster, which is why things sound really good and tight. Because back in the day, you're on one console and you're mixing everything on 56 channels of virtually the same EQ and the same line amp, and the colors just glue really well together. So that's my mix breakdown in a nutshell, using the 8068 plugin and some of the other Apogee toys. Hope you enjoyed it, and happy mixing.